What is up, my beautiful Recovered on Purpose family? Thank you for being here for the Recovered on Purpose show guest Saturdays. Guys, we have an amazing guest today, and we have a pretty emotional conversation to have. I love you guys so much. Enjoy the show and keep living Recovered on Purpose.
The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live Recovered on Purpose.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm super excited about this guest today. He and I actually did a episode of the Create You podcast, and we had a really deep conversation. And today I'm going to do a bio on him. But so you guys know, we are talking about something specifically about this community that I'm really excited to talk about. We haven't had this kind of conversation on the show yet, and I'm excited about it. So Jeff Salzenstein is a dynamic keynote speaker and performance coach committed to helping CEOs, executive leadership teams, and management teams achieve optimal performance by turning daily stress into extreme resilience and incredible results. Jeff is a former 4.0 All-American Stanford Tennis player who was the captain of the team who led Stanford to back-to-back NCAA Championships before going on to break the top 100 professional players in the world at 30 years old after 2 major surgeries that almost ended his career. Jeff is also a best-selling contributing author to the book The Ultimate Success Guide with Brian Tracy and the founder of Tennis Evolution, an online tennis training platform that has impacted millions of players and coaches worldwide. For more information about Jeff or to connect with him, visit jeffsalzenstein.com. All right, without further ado, Jeff, good to see you, brother.
No, it's amazing to be here today, and I'm so grateful that we've connected and we are building this incredible friendship, and you decided to have me on your show today.
Yeah, man, and I'm really excited to have you here, and I'm really excited about this connection as well. And I mean, we're going to get into it, but it's inspired me a lot, man. It's inspired me a lot, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about today and the reasons, the listeners of the show today, guys, really take this in. Really take this in, what this means for you and your life and your recovery. And if you're still struggling right now, what this actually means. So, Jeff, let's get into it. Tell everybody, let's talk first about your story. What it's like to have that kind of success, that kind of, peak performance in your life. When did that start, and when did you make that decision?
Yeah. So I always like to start in the middle of the story, and then we can work backwards. So I want to take you into a match. I want to take you to the US Open 1997. It's a second round match. It's a night match, Friday night before Labor Day weekend. And I'm playing a second round match against world number 2, Michael Chang, in front of 24,000 people inside of Arthur Ashe Stadium. So even if you're not a tennis fan, you've probably watched the US Open around Labor Day weekend. It's just on TV everywhere. And I was featured in that match against Michael Chang. I was about 140 in the world. I was this upstart American, and I'm serving at 5-4 in the first set. And 5-4 means you're basically one game away from winning a set if you don't know tennis scoring. And I've got set point, which means I'm 1 point away. And I've got this incredible serve. I developed this amazing serve in college that propelled me on the pro tour, which we may get into. And I hit my best serve. I come in, I hit this beautiful angle backhand volley just out of Michael Chang's reach. Again, number 2 in the world. He's the big favorite. And I win the first set. The crowd absolutely erupts. I see, guys from Wall Street that are in their suits standing up and like doing this thing when I win the first set. And I've got this little sly smile on my face. The TV cameras capture it. And that's when I tell people the match ended in that moment. People are like, what do you mean the match ended in that moment? Well, what happened was I remember the dominant thought in my mind in that moment when I won the first set off Michael Chang in front of millions of people on TV and at this tournament, in this big stadium. Thank God you didn't embarrass yourself tonight. And I like to start with that story because what I believe it identifies, and by the way, I went on to lose the next 3 sets. I lost the match. It was a very entertaining match. But guess what? My thoughts created my reality. I didn't embarrass myself. But I also took the foot off the gas. My performance dropped a little bit and I lost. And, what that signifies to me is that here I was, this extraordinary athlete that had achieved incredible things on the pro stage. So I was doing something very extraordinary in front of millions of people, but I was also very ordinary with my thinking. And I think we
Mm,
all can relate to limiting thinking, limiting beliefs, things that hold us back, the negativity. And I know we're going to go deep into really extreme negativity today around addiction, but I like to start there because I'm a mindset coach. My experiences propelled me to want to help, excuse me, help others with their limiting beliefs, with their
yeah.
stinky thinking. And so I'll stop there because you might have a question. And then of course I'll take you back through a quick story arc of how I even got to that moment. And then a little bit what happened after that match.
Yeah, and you talking about this is what I hear a lot with that kind of peak athleticism, like Tiger Woods and his father that would train him. It was all about mindset. He would like make him putt over and over and over, and he would do all these different things to him. He would like attack him or yell at him and do all these different things so that in that moment he just has this extreme focus, like it's going in that hole no matter what's going on out here. And where did you kind of develop
Mm.
that? Because this started way early on. I mean, you were 4.0 at Stanford, 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
So where did this actually start? What caused you to make this kind of decision for your life?
Sure. So I hope, I know we're going to go into the brain and the pathways and the highways and talk about that today. That's what happened with me. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old. And I believe in childhood trauma and childhood adversity really shapes who we are and the decisions we make. And so one of the reasons that we have this life is to actually heal the things that may have wounded us at an early age. And so for me, I think the defining moment was my parents' divorce at a young age. I was an only child. And so my father was a Division I college tennis player, and he was now a teaching pro in Peoria, Illinois, and then in St. Louis, Missouri. And my mom was a recreational player and great athlete. And so here I had these two parents that played tennis, great athletes. And so what do you do when you're an only child? You follow your parents to the park. And so I'm
Yeah.
2, 3 years old, dragging this tennis racket around, and my dad's giving me all these drills. Now, he wasn't like Tiger Woods' dad, where it was almost like he was groomed to be a world champion and
Yeah.
very intense. My father was and is a very gentle soul. He just wanted me to love the sport. Of course, he got me involved, but he never put pressure on me. And my mother never did either. So there's a lot of stories out there in athletics around parents that put a lot of pressure on their kids. I wasn't one of those. What happened with the divorce is I think I made a decision at 4 years old that the way I was going to get love, the way that I was going to be validated, the way that I was going to be seen in the world is I was going to be perfect. I
Mm,
was going to be the 4.0 student. I was going to be number one in tennis in anything I did. And so I was the kid that when I lost in baseball games and soccer games at 6, 7, 8 years old, I was the kid that was crying. If I
mm,
struck out, I cried in front of everyone. If I lost a tennis match, I just moped and cried. So there wasn't a lot of anger. It was probably more sadness around my performance, losses. But that's how it all started. And then my father, again, he kind of groomed me in a positive way, but he taught me how to play smart tennis. And Dr. Jim Lair, if the listeners want to look him up sometime, he's probably the top world-renowned sports psychologist in the world. And I've been friends with Dr. Lair since I was a kid because he was friends with my stepfather, and he also knew my father, and I played with his son. But he used to tell people, I actually had a conversation with him the other day. He used to tell people I was the smartest tennis player he ever saw on a tennis court at age 10, 11, 12. So it was
mm.
almost like I was a mini adult, like figuring things out, putting the puzzles together, keeping my emotions in check. Most of us at 10, 11, 12 aren't able to do that, but I was able to. About 12 years old, I was just so composed and so serious. My girlfriend jokes that because I'm more playful now, she says, you didn't really have that much fun as a child because you were so serious and you were so driven. And so I was just probably wiring my brain at that time to have that serious outlook, that focused outlook. And it just snowballed. I was a national champion at 12. And then, when you're winning at a young age and you're successful, one of the pathways is to keep going with it. And I did. And of course, I had some heartache and some down times during my junior tennis career and college and pros that helped build kind of where I'm at now. But that's how it started.
Yeah, awesome. And it's interesting because as you bring that up, I remember another show that I did with someone that was he was on like the amateur, but the kids level pro golf tour where he was competing against Tiger Woods and doing all this stuff. And then shortly after, he actually ended up a drug addict. And then he ended up being Hawaii's most wanted man all over the news and everything. So it's interesting just to see how, pathways can go with one simple decision, right? With one simple decision. And I believe that it doesn't matter where your past is, like where it comes from, where you come from, and what it is from there. But now we have all of these different decisions that are going to take us this way or this way through our entire life. So it's really interesting to be able to watch how you and him both were in this same type of place at that age and then went these two different directions.
And I'd love to get into some of those decisions right now real quick around my tennis career, and then we can kind of bring it up to speed on where we're going next. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm 12 years old. I'm a national champion, super focused. And then let's fast forward 3.5 years, almost 4 years. I'm 2 months shy of my 16th birthday. So I'm a sophomore in high school. I'm about to get my license. As a 15.5-year-old, and I know you were a big football player at Columbine High School. I went to Cherry Creek High School. So Adam and I are local guys from Denver, which we found out later. It's an amazing connection there. But I'm 15.5. I'm 5'4", 102 pounds. I'm using a phone book to see over the steering wheel. I'm not close to going through puberty. So I'm playing players now that are 6 inches taller, 50 pounds heavier. They got the 5 o'clock shadow. It's intimidating. And I go to the nationals, the 16 and under nationals, and I lose first round singles, first round doubles, first round consolation, which means you were triple crown. Now that's not the triple crown in horse racing where you win all the races. That's a triple crown where you lose every match and everyone's talking about you. Like, wow, what happened to Salzenstein? He was a national champion 3 years ago. Now he's like this, right? And that would be the time, right? 15.5, you're sucking it up in tennis. You used to be a champ and you're losing now. That would be the time to quit. That would be the time to maybe start dabbling, smoking pot, hanging out with your friends. I didn't do that. I doubled down. I quit basketball. I quit baseball. I quit skiing. And I said, my chance at a college scholarship, my dream to play at Stanford since I was 12 years old, the greatest tennis program of all time, I gotta just double down and lock in. And that's what I did. And so, like you said, it was a decision. I just said, I want to go to Stanford. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm quitting everything. And I got back to the fundamentals. And I started recalibrating and refocused, and I grew and I went through puberty. And just a year later, I was back in the top 5 in the country. And a year after that, I accepted a scholarship to play for my dream school at Stanford.
Amen.
My freshman year, I went 22-4. I won at number 5 singles, but I had the worst serve in college tennis. And all the kids, all the college kids were going to play that summer circuit of pro tennis, the lowest level of pro tennis, the minor league. So I went on this circuit for 3 weeks, and I couldn't get out of the qualifying rounds. So when you're 19 years old and you have a serve that doesn't break 100 miles an hour and you have no weapons, you aren't playing pro tennis. You're going to graduate from Stanford and you're going to go work in Silicon Valley when you're done. There was no track for me to play pro tennis. And so instead of continuing to play pro tennis, I made a decision that summer. I went back to Denver and I was watching Wimbledon, and I watched this player named Goran Ivanisevic, 125 mile an hour serve, left-handed, big fireball, aces everywhere. And I went out on the court the next day and I modeled Goran's serve. And almost overnight, I added 20 miles an hour. It was almost like an accidental transformation. Wow. I didn't know what I was doing. I just it was like throwing things against the kitchen wall and seeing if it would stick, and it stuck. And so I go back to college that for my sophomore year, and the coaches were blown away. Coach Gould, he was shocked. And so he put me at the top of the lineup, and the rest was history. Now I was on this completely different trajectory because I had grown 3 inches. I had developed this massive serve that everyone was talking about. So I went from having one of the worst serves to one of the best serves. And so that catapulted my college career, the national championships and the team captain and all that stuff. And that allowed me to go on and play pro tennis. So speaking to the power of decisions, you're just one decision away. You're one experimentation away, one just breakthrough away from completely changing your life. And that's one of my messages, is that you got to just stick in there. You got to stay in there, because big changes can happen if you do the right things.
Amen. And there was actually a theme in there that I wanted to touch on. When you lost when you're 15 and a half, right? And you made this decision to cut everything else out and focus, you succeeded at that. And then when you started to notice something that you had to cut basically all of your other stuff out and focus on your serve, you succeeded at that. Do you think, because we're not all tennis players. We're not all working on becoming an athlete like this,
Right.
but everybody listening to this right now has some area in their life that if they were to cut everything else out and focus, they would have major success in it. What do you think it is that makes you able to make that decision? And how do you select which thing is going to be the one to go after 100% with focus?
Adam, I don't think anyone has taken those two stories, put it together, and asked the question like that. So I think it's amazing that I get to answer it now, because I hadn't really thought of it that way. And it's so true, because even today, I struggle with distraction. And I imagine as a kid, I did as well, although we didn't have as many distractions. I'm 49 years old. This was going on in the late 80s. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. We didn't have all the distractions. So I imagine that I was probably more focused then than I even am now, because of everything around us, right? So for the listeners, you have to identify what is the one big thing that you want to tackle. So if you are struggling with a mental health issue, if you're struggling with addiction, or if you are, struggling with a child, a child in your family, or you're trying to figure out the pathway of your career, you have to identify what's the one big thing. So when I was 15 and a half, the one big thing was, hey, I'm doing too many things. I'm losing. My only chance at a college scholarship is to focus on tennis.
Yeah.
And when on my serve, like you said, I could have played that summer circuit and kept working on my game and all my strokes. But my big saying, which Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results, and then complaining about it to everyone around you. So the serve was the thing I identified. I got no chance of playing at the top of the Stanford lineup and maybe playing pro tennis if I don't change my serve. Everything else could stay the same. I just need to change that. So when it comes to the listeners, I really think you need to identify what the one thing is. So for me, my one big thing now is I made this massive transition from being this online tennis coach, and I've helped millions of people with tennis videos for the last decade. And then I've been doing executive coaching for the last 5 years. But in the last 6 to 8 months, I made the decision that I'm going to be a world-class keynote speaker. So when I wake up in the morning, that is my number one thing that I focus on. Of course, I have to handle other things in life, but that's my number one thing. If you want to change a health habit, if you want to improve your mobility, let's say, and you got tight hips and tight ankles and a hurt knee, you can't work on cardio and strength at the same level if you really want to work on your mobility. So I really encourage people to really get one habit or one behavior change to happen, get that solidified, then you can focus on the next thing instead of trying to change 6 things at the same time.
100%. And I've noticed it in my own life as well. Recently, because with Recovered on Purpose, for the last 18 months, I've been trying to make it so that we could sustain this as a community by selling coaching and selling courses and things like that, and making it so that we could grow this thing organically. And then once we got 501c3, I was at a point where I had to take, I was having to take a job. I was really close to having to take a job. So I was putting out my resume and doing this stuff. And then I got to this point where I got 3 job offers. I went through all of these different levels, and, over 1,000 people were looking for this director's sales position. I'm talking to the owner, and I just literally had to tell him, I was like, my heart isn't here. I wouldn't be able to give it to you. And then I just cut out all of that stuff, all of the job searching, all of the other business stuff. And since I made that decision, I've been focusing on nothing but Recovered on Purpose and nothing but making it so that we can make this thing happen. Dude, the doors have opened like crazy. The amount of people that have come in, we're this close to some major partnerships to make some really big change in the recovery community. And it's not even, it's scientific. Worried about these different things in life. If you need to focus on your health, there's certain things that you will automatically cut out. And I'm working with somebody in my course right now who's doing this right now. She's creating a course for people in recovery while she's doing her own health journey right now. And just by focusing on doing the exercise every day, she automatically is eating better. She's automatically drinking more water and less soda. She's automatically waking up earlier and sleeping better. You know, and all of that comes from fixing that focus, right? And I want to get into, you said you were a single child, right?
I was a single child, yeah.
Yeah. When was Eric born? How old were you when Eric was born?
Sure. So yeah, I'll bring everyone up to speed. I'll kind of close the loop on this with my story, and then we'll talk about Eric, which is really why we're here, right? So I transform my serve. I go on the pro tour I shoot up the rankings. I mean, I go from 900 in the world to 140 in the world in 12 months. I'm one of the kind of hot new Americans at 23 years old. I got my degree at Stanford, and I'm playing Cheng in that match. And I lose to Michael Cheng in that match. And the next day I'm in a Midtown Manhattan hotel with Pete Sampras's agent at the time and his junior agent from IMG. And they're like, hey, sign on the dotted line. We want you, man. You're going to sign with IMG. We're going to represent you. So this is like happening, right?
Yeah.
So 3 months later, I'm playing a pickup basketball game at Greenwood Athletic Club in Denver, Colorado. And I come down for a rebound and I feel a sharp pain in my ankle. And that began an odyssey where I couldn't figure out the pain in my ankle. I was going to doctors. They were putting me in a boot. They're all these different things they were trying to do, and the pain wouldn't go away. 8 months later, I found a doctor in New York who determined what was happening, and we had surgery 3 days later. I come back from that surgery, and my first tournament back in Miami, Florida, at the Miami Open, I win the match, but I felt a click in my knee. And that was misdiagnosed for six weeks. And then I had knee surgery. So before the age of 25, ankle surgery, knee surgery, right after my career was about to go like this. I lost everything, if you will. My ranking, wasn't making any money. I was sleeping in my parents' basement. I didn't know if I was going to come back, maybe a little bit of depression. You know, it's my identity. I'm a tennis player. Like, that's what I've done since I was 4 years old, and it's been taken away from me. And I made a decision in that moment. Am I going to quit, or am I going to double down again? There's not a lot of quit in me. So I doubled down. And what I did, Adam, is I became obsessed with all things high performance. I went to my first yoga class. I started eating organic food before it was considered cool. I was going to Whole Foods before it was even called Whole Foods. Wild oats and alfalfas. And that's what I was into at 24 years old.
Yeah.
And so that allowed me to break the top 100 in the world for the first time at the age of 30. And so I was playing better tennis in my 30s than I was in my 20s. And I really studied everything: spirituality, mindset, nutrition, biomechanics, you name it, footwork, movement, because I didn't have coaches that could really show me. So being the cerebral guy, I went down the rabbit hole. Well, fast forward, I'm 33 years old. I'm on the other side of that top 100 ranking. I'm still having more injuries. I hadn't really solved some of my feet issues, plantar fasciitis, my shoulder stuff, like par for the course pro athlete.
Yeah.
And I remember visiting my brother and my two sisters, my father and my stepmother. So my father created a second family after the divorce many years later. And my brother, Eric, was born when I was 17 years old. And I was getting ready to go off to college in a year or two. And here's this newborn, rambunctious, positive kid, full of energy. And so I was his godfather. I was, kind of an uncle figure almost, because we didn't grow up together. But here I am, 34 years old. I'm winding down on the pro tour. I'm having a hard time quitting, giving up the dream, but I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. I don't even want to get on planes to play tournaments anymore. I'm not fired up to practice anymore. It's like the life, it was like I was burned out, like the life had gone out of me with pro tennis. I remember walking into his room one morning, he's 17 years old, and I walk in, he's not in his bed, he's laying on the floor, he's passed out, there's white foam coming out of his mouth. And in that moment, I quit professional tennis. And in that moment, I decided I was going to become a coach. And it was almost, I didn't even have to deliberate. I just made the decision in that moment. I was going to help my brother with his addiction issues. I was going to help my family. And so everything changed. I went from thinking about myself and how I could get to the top of the tennis world to how do I save my brother? How do I move back to Denver and buy a house and have him come live with me and get him in a community that could help him stay in recovery? And then all my focus made a big right turn in that direction.
Yeah. And first off, thank you for that. I think that's a big deal for our community. Because a lot of us have been in positions where we didn't have anybody. We didn't have anybody in our life that would do something like that for us. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the community. And how does that go when you make that decision? You start basically living with him and living for him and helping him.
Yeah.
How is that experience, and how is his success with that?
Yeah, I don't think I've talked about this specifically on a podcast before or an interview, but I tell people that if I hadn't walked in and seen him on the floor, passed out like that, just in this helpless state, possibly overdosing, if I would have gotten a call from my father, hey, this happened, I don't think I would have done anything. But the fact that I saw it with my own eyes, I saw the struggles my parents were having, figuring out what to do with him. And I knew I was an action taker and I'd always kind of found success in my life. I said, listen, I know I can put this together. So I borrowed $18,000 from a wealthy friend. God bless him. I borrowed $18,000 from a grandmother, and I found a rehab facility, put him in the facility. It was a 90-day program. It was kind of a more holistic type program in that, he did sauna and supplements and really tried to detox his physical body. But we stayed in touch during those 3 months. And then I made the arrangements to buy a home in Denver and have him come live with me instead of going back to Orlando, Florida, where he was getting into trouble. So he comes to live with me. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made, not knowing, but still consulting, is I didn't put enough guardrails, accountability. Hey, if you're going to live here, these are the expectations. These are the things that happen. And if you do not follow these rules or these guidelines, I'm sorry, you can't live here. It was too loosey-goosey. And, I just didn't get the right coaching on that at the time. And so when he came in, we got him a job. He had 2 jobs. He was being productive, but pretty quickly he started getting around some people that were not doing the right things. I think he probably had temptations to use. He wasn't going to meetings, or he didn't have a community. And so he started using drugs pretty quickly after, in the home. And I didn't know it, but I started to see behaviors change. I started to pick up some cues. And about 3 months in, I put a drug test down on the table when he was watching TV one day. And I said, hey, you can take this now. And he said, I'm not taking it. I said, well, then you can go back to the rehab facility. They said they would take you back if you relapsed. And he said, I'm not going back. That program doesn't work. And I said, okay, well, you have 6 days to find, I got coached on this part, whether it was right or wrong. You have 6 days to find another place to live. Otherwise, I will be putting your stuff on the lawn. You're not going to stay here. You have a week, basically. And so he ended up going back to Florida to live with his parents, and created a life of destruction for the next 5 years until ultimately he landed in prison.
Wow. And there is, I've spoken with parents, I've spoken with people that have their people that are suffering, asking to come back home. And there's different coaching for each situation. I've literally told mothers that I know, that I'm close with, yeah, it's not time. The way that he's talking, if he comes back, all it's going to do is damage you guys' relationship. He's not ready to stop, and he's not in a place where he's going to listen. If he's coming with all of the rules in order for him to come stay at your place, that's saying something right there. And for me, at the beginning in my very early recovery, I was at a sober living house. I had just come off of being homeless and everything. And there were really strict rules there. There was a early curfew that you had to go to a certain amount of meetings. You had to get drug tested like randomly every single week. And, that kind of stuff helped me. But at that point, I don't know if it really mattered all that much because I was truly, truly ready. And I think someone that really is really ready to be clean and be in recovery, they're going to be talking to you about what rules to put on them. We're going to talk about, hey, like, this is what I'm worried about. How do we set a boundary here? This is what I'm worried about. How do I set a boundary here? So, and there's no one size fits all either. And I've had people that have passed away in my recovery that I've thought, dang it, I could have done something. I've been crying in customs before because I found out on a plane from Colombia to Florida, found out right when I got off that this girl that was basically like my little sister had passed away from overdose. And I was talking to her, I'd taken her to a couple meetings and stuff. And then I just break down in customs. They're searching my bag and everything because I felt like there was something I could have done more. But in reality, you did way more. You did way more, bro.
Oh, dude, I started coaching. All I did was coach 40 hours a week. I was charging $75 an hour as giving tennis lessons. And I was living with my mother and my stepfather to save up money because I had borrowed the money for his rehab. I paid the rehab. I paid my friend back. I bought the house. I was literally ready to step into the role of father, big brother. I took him to a guy locally here who helped troubled youth. And we had a meeting in a hotel lobby. And I was like, hey, this guy could mentor you. And we left the meeting and Eric said, I don't want him to mentor me. I tried to get him into Phoenix Rising Phoenix something around exercise and rock. Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, I don't want to do that. So the words, the actions, none of it suggested that he's like, I'm ready. And it was always resistance. It was me. And one of the things I've learned as a coach, again, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. I usually don't coach people when I'm working with executives and leaders or even athletes. I test them first before I even take them on as a client, because I'm like, let me see where this person is. Like, I can tell by their words and kind of what they say. I have those cues if they're really serious, because it never works when the coach, which is me, wants it more than the player.
Exactly.
And I used to give tennis lessons to kids. The parents would bring the kids for lessons and say, why isn't little Johnny getting better? I'm like, because you want it more than him and I want it more than him. Yeah. So they got to want it. And I think, Eric at that time in his life didn't want it. And he went back home and he was in a home that didn't have a lot of discipline. And so he was able to kind of run the roost there. So, and that was a really tough period where he got into a lot of trouble. And like I said, ultimately landed in prison. Those 5 years, he got into a lot of trouble. He not only was using drugs, but he started dealing drugs. He became a dealer. He had this, from my understanding, what he told me, he had this pipeline or this thing set up where he would go into doctors' offices and get the opioids or the oxycodone, or maybe he wouldn't go in, the mothers would go in, the women would go in and get it, and then they would get it to him, and then he would probably sell it for more. I mean, I don't know that world. My brother knew the world. He knew how to get drugs. He knew how to sell drugs. I mean, he had that whole system. I was so naive. I'm just like the golden child from Stanford, that's been coddled his whole life playing tennis. And here my brother is in the hood of Orlando selling drugs until he ultimately committed 2 felonies, armed robbery for both, drug related. And then he was facing life in prison from the 2 felonies. And the public defender, we couldn't afford a lawyer, so the public defender was representing him. And what was crazy about this story is that 2 weeks before he was supposed to be tried or sentenced, the prosecuting attorney who was going to throw the book at him quit and got married. And the new prosecuting,
Amen. Let's go.
The new prosecuting attorney came in and was friends with the public defender. And they basically said, listen, if he does a plea deal, we'll take these 2 4-year terms that would add up to 8, and we'll make them run concurrent. So it'll only be 4 years. So Eric asked God to just give him whatever time he was supposed to have to heal himself. And God gave him 4 years instead of life. And so he went to maximum security prison outside of Tallahassee, Florida, when he was 23 years old.
Wow. And he got a 4-year sentence. And I think it was, halfway through the sentence, something starts to happen. What happens halfway through that sentence?
Right. So he goes to prison with all the inmates. And again, my brother grew up in a middle-class home. His mother taught him God. My father taught him sports. He was a great basketball player. I mean, this is a guy you would never think he'd be in this position, right? In maximum security prison at 23 with 2 armed robberies. It's not supposed to happen to my family and to Eric. Yeah. So he goes up there, and for the first 6 months to a year, he's treating it like he's still a gangsta. He's gonna like be the cool guy, and he was selling cigarettes, and he was getting into trouble. And you have to protect yourself. You have to be willing to fight. He got into gang fights, and at one time he got into a fight, and he was put in solitary confinement, I believe, for about 50 days. So he was sitting solitary for 50 days, and I think that was the moment, sitting alone in silence. It took him 50 days in a dark prison cell to say, "What the F am I doing? Yeah. What am I doing? Like, I'm going to waste this time, and I'm going to get out, and I'm going to do the exact same stuff that I did before." So he came out and he called me. We weren't in touch at all. I pretty much said, "Listen, I'll get updates from Dad, but I'm just not going to be involved in this." And Adam, you and I have talked about how maybe I could have done some things differently just to let him know I was there. But I pretty much drew the hard line that, listen, if you're going to live like this, I'm not going to be involved. But he called me from a prison house phone, and he said, "Jeff, I really want to change, but I don't know how. I don't know how to do it." So I said, okay. So I sent him 2 books. I sent him The 4-Hour Workweek, and I wanted him to learn entrepreneurship. I wanted him to learn something different from the 9 to 5. Yeah. The second book I sent him, which resonated even more, was Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And he read that book cover to cover, and it helped him develop a value system. And once Eric developed a value system, and now he had the picture, like Tony Robbins in the book gave him the vision, gave him the idea of how to do it. And he just started transforming in prison. He started, the prison yard became his place to gain superhuman strength. He just became so jacked and cut. He was the skinny 5'8", 140 pound, scrawny dude. All of a sudden, he becomes this kind of bodybuilder type. He started meditating. He started cleaning the toilets at 5 a.m. He was actually mentoring other inmates. He became a real leader in prison. People were looking up to him because he was teaching, and he was sharing, he was coaching. And he also found a hidden talent for public speaking. And he won a contest as a public speaker. And so that was something that really gave him a lot of juice, a lot of self-esteem that, hey, I can do these things. And it was beautiful for me to witness. Every week we'd get on a call and do coaching calls from prison. And it was my greatest success story. I loved watching my brother transform, and he was inspiring me. He was teaching me. I was teaching him. He was teaching me. So it was an incredible journey just into prison. And then when he got into work release and started doing some incredibly positive things when he got out of prison.
Amen. And I actually have a compilation to show everybody for this transformation right here.
Hey, motivation. That's how much I care about you. I'm going to constantly push myself to put out better content for you. And I'm going to ask you to do what I did in that cell and make a decision to break free. Over deliver, baby. Value, baby. Value, baby. one single step at a time can create huge change.
Face the curve.
What is the one step you're going to take tonight, tomorrow morning, to get yourself to a better place?
It doesn't matter about your lineage, your family history, your past mistakes. Today is a new day.
We have to be willing to endure the friction that comes from growth. We have to be willing to endure the pain that comes from stretching and reaching out for something greater. We have to be willing to endure the temporary discomfort that comes with lasting change. We have to be willing to go from prison to prosperity.
You are worthy. Put together a plan, put it on paper, and take action. Let's grow together.
Yeah, man, I love it. I love it so much.
Larger than life, huh? He is like
Amen.
freaking powerhouse, man.
Amen. And while I was working on that, said that he won that speak off, right?
Right.
And do you know what speak off that was?
Right. So in prison, he won the contest. And then when he got out, a little fun fact is he started serving. So he knew how to, he had been in sales and timeshares, and he started waiting tables when he got out. And the first place he worked at was an Outback Steakhouse. And he went in, he was very honest with everyone. He said, listen, I'm getting out of prison, and management gave him a job. And very quickly, he became the #1 server at Outback, and people got jealous. And they actually went to national and said, this restaurant hired a convicted felon. How dare you? And he got fired. He got let go because he was a convicted felon, even though he was #1, even though he was honest, even though he was doing all the right things. Then he went on to fine dining, and one of the fine dining restaurants that he worked at, he got to #3 in the nation for most revenue, most sales as a server in a very short amount of time. He really understood how to serve people, how to make them have a great experience. And so what happened around 2018, 2019, I've got a friend named Pete Vargas who runs a group. Yeah.
It's just blowing my mind, bro.
Yeah. So Pete Vargas, I'm his tennis coach. Pete,
dude, tell Pete we met, bro. Tell Pete you were just on my show, dude.
Yeah, Pete, we met over a decade ago on a tennis court, and this was before Pete even blew up in the online space. He was just didn't even know anything about the online world. And then I fast forward about 5 years later, and he becomes the go-to guy to help people with their signature talk. And so I had gone to a couple of his events in Colorado Springs. And I remember telling my brother, I said, listen, Pete's throwing this event in a couple months. You need to go after this. And so he got a scholarship, paid like a partial fund to go into this, like $1,000 instead of 2,000. And my brother submitted his 3-minute video, and then he got out to the main thing. And I got into it as well. And my brother made the top 10 and I didn't. And he stayed with me in my apartment in Denver. It was held in Denver. And then he made the top 10. And then my brother ultimately won the entire speak off. And that's how he got his TED talk. And so there's a video, I'll send it to you. There's a video of Pete Vargas announcing the win and then them embracing. And so it was an incredible experience. It was May of 2019. And I was his corner man. You know, I was the guy carrying his bags and getting his water. And because that's the role I actually love. Like, I love being someone's corner man. I just love it. Like, I just get so much juice, much more than playing Michael Chang at the US Open. And that's why I know I was born to coach and I was born to serve, because I didn't feel fulfilled being a pro athlete. It was a great journey and I loved it. But so, yeah, that's how it was Pete Vargas's event. And that just catapulted his speaking and business career.
So I've been like, it's just blowing my mind, bro. I've been telling you basically since we met, how much Eric and I are alike, like how many things are just so lined up, so many different things. That's why, like, I put that video together and put clips in there that remind me of myself. Like, if you saw me with my dogs, that's it. if you saw me, dancing around and doing stuff like that, or the way that I talk to people and you can do it, write it down and do it and all that stuff. I have my TEDx talk, coming in October. And bro, I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but I've seen the video of Pete and your brother. I've been in the speak off. I was supposed to be in the one in Florida when COVID happened. Pete was going to be a guest on my master class right when COVID happened. So it's just blowing my mind, bro. It just inspires me so much. The connectivity, man. And let's keep going with Eric's story. Let's keep going with Eric's story. So what's going on in his life after 2019? How's everything going? Sure. He does the TED Talk, everything.
Yeah. So he gets the TED Talk in Denver. His career's starting to kind of take off, where he's starting to do some life coaching. And at this point, a couple things I want to backtrack. When he got into work release and he started working at these restaurants, this was a big warning sign, looking back. He started drinking right away. So he was clean in prison, but as soon as he got out, I imagine the trauma, the anxiety, being in a prison for 4 years, it's a lot, right? And not knowing what to do with that. His gateway was alcohol. Now, with that being said, I don't think he was going out on benders and getting drunk. I think it was just, 1 or 2 drinks a night to kind of smooth the edges. And, he was highly functioning and doing great things. And I remember telling him when that was going on, there was actually talk about him coming to Colorado to live with me. And I said, if you come live with me, 2 things: you're not going to drink, and I can drug test you. And he would not agree to that. And so that was a rub. But so alcohol was in his life early on, and I think he managed it well. But that when you have that propensity to fall into addiction, it's very challenging to managing, because one drink becomes 2 and 2 becomes 3, and the cycle. I won't get into it because you know it better than I do. But so that was a warning.
Bro, I gotta pause you really quick. I gotta pause you. We lost you for about a minute.
Okay. How are we doing?
Are you still there?
I'm here. I'm here.
There we go.
Hello?
Yeah, I apologize, brother. Lost you at 2019. Where is he going?
Yeah, 2019. So he gets out of, first he gets out of prison at the end of 2017, and he's in work release. And right out of work release, he started drinking alcohol. And I remember telling him, listen, don't drink, and just don't even do it. Like, don't mess with it. And, he said, I got it under control. I've done my time. I've done my work on myself. I can manage it. And I just didn't like that. I didn't have a good feeling about it. In fact, he was going to come live with me in Denver. I said, you won't be able to drink, and I can drug test you at any time. He would not agree to those guidelines. So that was a warning sign. But he was highly functioning. He was doing great things. And so I continued to coach him and support him. And so I started getting him in the rooms with a lot of the top marketers in the world: Craig Ballantyne, Xander Fryer, a top business coach. Got him in the room with Todd Brown, who's just an OG of marketing. And so he was like a sponge. He was taking notes. He was asking questions. He was networking. He's such an extrovert. Yep. And he started learning how to create the business coaching model of where you bring people in through Instagram, they get in the DMs, you have a conversation, and you sell them, hey, you're a nutrition coach, you're a fitness coach, you do this offline, we can show you how to build a program online. And he started getting incredible results. And he went from, 0 to making $70,000 a month in a high ticket business coaching situation, business. And it happened so fast. I mean, we're talking 12 months, 18 months. It came too fast for him. It was too easy almost. Yeah. One of the things that he was going to do when he got out of prison, he was going to speak to schools. And I was always pushing him in that direction. But when he got wind of this business possibility and growing this business coaching, he went all in on that. Didn't even think about speaking to kids after that. And I think that was, that was a decision that ultimately created more problems because it was more money, more pressure, more stress. The trauma hadn't been cleared. And it led to him starting to use again in the summer of 2020. So a year after a year after he won the contest, he started using hard drugs and then began like a 2.5-year spiral. And I found out because his girlfriend was the one finding him using, and she tried to cover it up for a while because they were running this business together and she was basically protecting him. And then eventually she got so scared and she couldn't talk to anyone. Of course, she calls Big Brother, the guy who's I'm the fixer, I'm the problem solver. She calls me. And then, obviously we tried different things over time, but I watched this incredible ascent. And then as soon as the hard drugs kicked in, I watched this decline. And really, really sad story there. He did get into rehab in Denver for a stretch. He was in sober living in Denver for 2 months, and then he left. He lived in Mexico for about 8 months. I think he got with the wrong people down there too. And ultimately, 8 weeks ago, he had an accidental overdose and he died. And, at least I knew this day might be coming because it was either he was going to overdose, he was going to hurt someone else, or he's going to go back to prison. Those were kind of the three things on the table the past 6 months to a year, because I watched him lose everything. I watched him lose his business. I watched him lose the family, the girlfriend. And he was trying. I mean, he had a priest he was going to, he had a sponsor he was talking to. But I just think the demons were so strong for him that he wasn't able to overcome them. And so now we're celebrating his life. We're focusing on how he transformed. And so, I don't want to stay too long in the darkness, because I watched the single greatest transformation of my lifetime. And I think people that are listening can relate to the highs and the lows, and that my brother is not defined by his addiction. He was so much more than that. And he really, truly inspired so many people. And when we had the memorial service 2 weeks after his passing, people came out in droves, people from all walks of life. He really, really made a difference. And so I know you are on that purpose, Adam, and I am as well now as his brother, to share his message.
Amen. Amen. And I love that. And, I think it was our first conversation when we were getting to know each other, and, I was hearing his story. It's so much like mine that it put up another level of defense for me, bro. Just another deep level of defense. And I got to a point also with a business in early recovery where, at 1 month I was able to make, 50, 60,000. And, we were doing that kind of income for 2 years, 2.5 years. And I can see how that could, if I wasn't really, really plugged in like I was, if I wasn't, staying with my community and everything, I can see how that would take me out. And I think that God put it in my life early in my recovery for a reason. And interesting, I was thinking if I was going to bring this up on the show or not, but last night I went to this private club, and it's with a bunch of tech people, and you have to use a QR code to get in and everything. And I'm talking to this guy at the bar. I'm drinking my michelada, and, just having a regular conversation. And then we get to a point where he lets me know, yeah, I've sold 3 businesses so far. My first one I sold for $100 million. My second one, and I'm like, okay, so this is the kind of person I'm talking to. And then he's telling me about his new project. And then he asked me what I do. And all I have to talk about, is, and not all, but it's just about, how much I want to make impact on this community, how much I'm doing with this, about this community and the things that are wrong and all that kind of stuff. And just this passion starts coming out. And he's just sitting there sitting on the stool. And he says to me, I've never told anybody this, but I'm completely unfulfilled. And I envy you right now. I envy what you're saying to me right now. And then we have this conversation. I'm like, well, if you could make impact on one project in the world, what would it be? And, we go into, he wants to impact the environment. And by the end of that conversation, we had an action plan for him to get involved in a major way with an environmental foundation, or finding his own, and creating his own. And I think it's really important that people out there that are listening right now, because that was another impactful one for me. Like, it's all about the impact that you make on the planet. And money and things like that, if you're chasing it, it can choke it out, right? So I just really, really appreciate it. And I want you to know, like, I'm super, super grateful to be connected with you. It blows my mind that you're in Denver. I'm sure that we have a lot of the same connections. And
it's incredible.
I want to do whatever I can to help what he was doing. Because, dude, it's the same message. It's the same message.
Yeah.
So anything I can do to help continue getting it out, man, I'm here for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I was having a conversation with a top Silicon Valley investor 2 days ago, and the time we're recording this, there was a big bank that went defaulted in the last 72 hours. And he was like, everyone's just panicking in the Silicon Valley. And I was sharing my story of what I'm doing now. I'm speaking and I'm sharing my brother's message. And it was like silence when I finished. He says, "Oh my gosh, that is so amazing what you're doing." He's like, he goes, "It's not about the money." Like, he's made a bunch of money, and other people in Silicon Valley. And he said, if Warren Buffett, with all the money he has, could turn back the clock 30 years and get his time back to be a time billionaire with all the seconds we have left for the next 30, 40, 50 years, that's what it's about. And Mahatma Gandhi has this quote that I use in my keynotes, and it's about, true health is physical health. It's not pieces of gold and silver.
Yes.
And so we're chasing the money, and we're chasing the status, and we're chasing just to keep up with the Joneses. And it's a trap. It's totally a trap. Yes. And so obviously you would love to have both, right? You want to have a lot of money, and you want to have a lot of fulfillment and purpose, but sometimes it's challenging to have both. Like, that is maybe the ultimate quest, right? And what's interesting is my life, I haven't chased the money, and it's caused some rub, because sometimes I've been uncomfortable with that. I played pro tennis for 11 years. Even though I got to 100 in the world, I wasn't making bank. I was just basically covering my expenses. I mean, think of that, to be 100 in the world at something and not be able to make enough money to basically be able to do whatever you want, right?
Wow.
But I chose that, right? I made that decision, and I've chosen to be a coach. I've chosen to do an online tennis platform to help tennis players. Like, I didn't get into finance. I didn't get into banking. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But as you alluded to, a lot of people get into that world, and every day they're brainwashed about the money. And then they wake up one day and go, what was it all for? Yeah. So I love the mission you have, and I'm passionate about my mission. I can honestly say I wake up in the morning choosing this life, moving towards working on fulfillment and helping others, than trying to put extra zeros in the bank. Amen. If that happens, great. But, it is powerful.
Amen. And after having that conversation, it secured in myself why it is that I'm so, fulfilled right now, even though I'm not making anything right now. I'm not making anything, but when I was making all that money, I was investing, half of it into Pete Vargas courses and 100X courses. And, I was building this brand, and I was helping people, and I was coaching people for free, because I was able to, because this is what I actually want to do. So listeners, guys out there, there is something that you are here to do. You have a purpose. You have, and if you're in recovery, it's very simple to find your purpose. Your purpose is to help people find it too. Jeff, thank you so much for coming, brother. This has been amazing. Super blessed to know you. I'm excited to get connected when I'm back in Denver, and we can make some moves together, brother.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And I'll just leave it with my brother's message. Some of his tenets was, make sure you get a coach or a mentor to help you come up with a game plan. So if you're out there and you're confused and you don't know where to go, come up with a game plan. Be willing to stretch your comfort zone. You're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable. So with that support, stretch that comfort zone, and take small daily action steps every day.
Amen. Yes, I love it. Love it. Thank you for being here, brother. Guys, thank you for being here at the Recovered on Purpose show. We will see you tomorrow night for another episode of Guest Sundays. Love you all and keep living.